Thank you, thank you. Okay, diving right in. You already know all that. Let's just jump right into the deal. The beautiful thing about the medium-duty market, people always ask me, well, what kind of a truck is a Class 4? What kind of a truck is a Class 5? Guess what? They're scalable. So that cement truck right there, that holds about 6 cubic yards of cement. That's a Class 4 cement mixer. My apologies, it's not from the US market. That particular truck happens to live over in China right now. But in the United States, we have Class 1 cement trucks. I've used this example before, right? You and your neighbor live 10 feet apart from each other because you have a 5-foot setback law on the property line, and you want to put in a concrete patio. So rather than spending, $10,000 to rent a concrete boom truck that has an arm that will reach over the top of the house and spit the concrete back there, you get a pickup truck and drive between the houses, and there's your patio, right? So that's the beauty. These things can be anything, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. But I'll kind of define the market, and just like on my used truck presentation, talk about what the current market indicators are, what the health is, if you will. I'm going to spend a little bit of time, too, talking about what drives demand for medium-duty vehicles, because it's a very different space than the Class 8 space that we've been so focused on for most of the day today. We'll share forecasts, and then if we've got some time, we'll talk about what's coming down the pike at us in the medium-duty space, and it's a technology-related, not quite rant, but maybe reality check. So one of the fun things that I get to do is pick out trucks, pick pictures of trucks that I like. I try to be an equal opportunity offender when it comes to brands, so I actually maintain a spreadsheet of OEMs, so I keep a parity in my rotation of these pictures. But who doesn't love a craft beer truck, right? So, okay, everybody, I'm in between you and the beer. I understand that, right? I'm going to talk as quickly as I can, so you'll have to listen as quickly as you can. The faster you listen, the faster I'll talk, okay? So perfect. The more you think about it, right? So you've got light duty, and these definitions have changed over time. So this is kind of where things stand right now. They're largely driven by the configuration of the vehicle. Now, in this particular instance, it's not terribly representative because I've chosen a low cab forward truck. That's really the minority vehicle in this space. Typically what you see is a pickup truck on steroids, as the bullet point says. So if you think about what the truck looks like, it looks like a Ram, or it looks like an F-250 or 350 or whatever. It's just bigger. It's got a bigger frame, it's got higher weight carrying capacity, bigger tires. It pulls up at you, pulls up behind you at the stoplight, and its headlights are glaring right in your rearview mirror, and you're afraid of it. That's what we're talking about here, right? On the 6-7 side, on the medium duty side, typically those look more like conventional Class 8 trucks, but they're a little bit smaller, right? Not as much weight carrying capacity. You have just kind of not miniaturized, but just shrunk down a little bit. And in terms of what these things can look like when they grow up, again, tapping our used truck database, we've identified over 200 different, we call it applications or vocations or body styles. These are some of the big groupings and some trucks that fit in there. But when they leave the factory, it's just a cab and frame rails sticking out the back. They don't have the body on the back of it, or they don't have whatever it is that they're going to need to do the work. Now, okay, some of the contractor trucks, it's just going to be a pickup truck with a bed, so that's a little bit different. But even those will go to upfitters and get tool boxes and racks and cranes and all kinds of stuff put on them. So that's one of the hard things about understanding this industry, because you can imagine if you're going into 200 different applications, trying to understand the end use markets, who the customer is, or what portion of the economy this vehicle supports, it can get pretty complicated and pretty convoluted. So This should be a familiar takeaway. It's a market in transition, very much like the used truck presentation that I did. The good news is that the transition is a very mild one. So if we break it down a little bit, I should mention too, that was class 4 through 7. In our State of the Industry series, we tend to focus on classes 5 through 7. But when it comes to the outlook, we actually do have the addition of class 4 in there. So I'll talk about it as well. A couple of infographics, if you will, to give you a sense of where things are. The pie chart shows you how big class 4 is in the 4 to 7 space. I think that's about 8%, something like that. So it's, as I mentioned, a relatively small piece. You see how sales have progressed over the last couple of years, stacked up, and how we're doing so far this year. And then you get some actual call-outs or some numbers down in the bottom. Very consistent market. There's not a lot of change in this market. The stack up in terms of who the players are, the market share, penetration, that sort of thing, fairly stable from year to year. So not a lot to see, at least at this point right now in the marketplace. We do, anticipate some new entrants into the space that might shake things up, but as in the case most of the time, that's not going to change total demand for the vehicles. It's going to dilute existing market share, so we'll see what happens in that space. Same look as far as class 5 is concerned. Again, not a lot of variation. Now, we do have one new entrant in the space this year. GM has come back to the, I guess in this case, medium-duty commercial vehicle market. They never left down in the class 1, class 2, class 3. They always kept that commercial business, but for those of you who don't have the benefit of about 10 years or more of history, GM actually used to, 30 years ago, or maybe longer than that, not quite that long ago, they actually used to make a Class 8 truck. They got out of that business a long time ago, but they got out of the medium-duty business back in the 2008, 2009 timeframe. GM needed some cash to subsidize their automobile business, and they said, oh, look, we've got this thing that we can get rid of. So they shuffled it off, and away it went. But they're back and enjoying some pretty good success. They've sold a good number of units so far this year, not only in the Class 5 space, but in Class 6, 7. Which is where the real change in dynamics has been so far. You can see we've got about a 5,000 unit increase through the first half of the year in terms of retail sales in this market, in the Class 6, 7 market. So, and it's probably it's about 60% of the 4 to 7 piece. I think a couple things going on in this space why Class 6, 7 is enjoying the growth, where the other two pieces are a little bit more stable. One is that GM piece, because as I mentioned, they've got product here. So whenever you have a new product, you've got to populate the distribution network, right? You've got to get product out there for customers to see and touch and kick and drive, and for the dealers to learn about, that sort of thing. So you have kind of a ramp-up period where you have big production, and of course this is sales, so they're getting some traction there. Some of these units are actually going off the lot and going to work. Some product refreshes from some of the other OEMs that have been very well accepted, I think generates a little bit of that portion. And then the third thought that I have with respect to the 6-7 space, if you look at market share, again, we tend to be agnostic, but I have to call out Navistar in this case. They've added about 4 percentage points of market share so far this year. One of their strong customer suits is the municipal market. If you think about housing, I know we talked about housing being down right now, but if you look at housing values, they are on an 84, 85, 86 month streak of increases. And if you think about where municipalities get their revenue, comes from property taxes in general. So there's still a tailwind in that municipal market. And there's certainly pent-up demand, because when that market got hammered, it got hammered horribly. And so there was a lot of delayed replacement in that space. So I think we're starting to see that continue to get sated, and that helps to kind of smooth out what's going to be happening over the next couple years in the forecast that we've got put together. One of the conversations that I've had today, and we've had numerous times before, is, is there a mix shift? And a lot of that is based on the premise of e-commerce. and last mile and final mile delivery. And we talk more about, what's the detrimental impact to the Class 8 side of the business as opposed to what's the accretive impact to the lighter space, because that's arguably where it's going. You can see some pretty compelling evidence that, from as far as Class 5 and Classes 6, 7 are concerned, there was kind of a coalescence of the markets back in the 2014-2015 timeframe. Full disclosure, there really was no Class 5 product back in this time frame. It existed prior to then, maybe somewhere over here, and then Ford introduced the Super Duty product in the late 1990s and basically restarted the growth in that business. As of late, so if you look at our data over the last, say, year, you see those curves start to diverge, and you say to yourself, we're seeing more of the big stuff, more of the Class 6, 7, and less of the Class 5. So the question is, and we don't know the answer, but we can surmise, are we seeing some of that freight get broken up, not being transported now on a Class 8 truck and trailer combination, but perhaps moving by a box truck, a 27-foot or smaller box truck? And I would say, yeah, there's probably a good possibility of that. I don't know if that's a permanent shift. I don't know if it's going to continue to widen, and 20 years from now we're going to have a big X. I don't think so. I think they're going to continue to coexist at relatively equal percentages, at least based on what we're seeing now. And I'm probably going to entertain some questions, I'm guessing, about market share or about e-commerce and that sort of thing. So I'll move along. Looking at some of the market indicators, this is an interesting picture. Look at the green bars. We have been down on a year-over-year basis every month so far this year, including the preliminaries in July. So cumulatively through July, total 5 to 7 net orders are down about 18%. Obviously, that's a damn sight better than what we're experiencing in the heavy-duty market. We took 490,000 orders in the Class 8 market last year, and we've only taken 90,000 so far this year, if my math is right. I think that's right. If it's not off by much. But so not nearly the volatility in this space that we've seen. And last year was a good year. We built some backlog. I'll show you a picture of that right here. In fact, our backlog didn't peak until February, and that's not a record high backlog for the 5 to 7 space. But you have to go back to the last century to see the previous record, so it might as well be best of all time. But you kind of get a sense of how things are going. You notice the lack of volatility, right? We did see an increase in the backlog to build ratio. We got up to 4 months. Wow. Class 8 would have loved to have only had 4 months worth of backlog. And we're just back inside our 2 to 3 month range in terms of the target or where we expect to see the backlog to build on medium duty space. So things are normalizing pretty quickly on this side. And I'll talk again when I get to my demand drivers about why that is. We are beset by the same issue from an inventory perspective, and what I talked about, those new product introductions or our high acceptance of new products or refreshes, is driving much of what you're seeing here. But look at the absolute level of inventory and look where we are with respect to where we think we need to be. We really have not deviated outside of that normal range, right? We've been at the high side most of the year, but we're not in trouble, so to speak. So I think of inventory kind of like working capital. If you have an elevated level of sales, you need a certain amount of inventory to support that activity. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I do think that we have some excess inventory in here. If you've watched my forecasting track record over the first half of this year, I have been loath to raise my production forecast because I think they are building inventory that will get worked off, or a lot of it will get worked off by the end of the year. I did increase the forecast that you see for this outlook and for this conference. I couldn't fight it any longer, and at the same time, the RV market is just in the tank, at least as far as Class A RVs is concerned. No, that's not true. It's in the tank no matter what it is, A, B, C, or even the towables. It's going to be a down year for the recreational vehicle market. So, and when you think about it, it's kind of the penultimate discretionary purchase. So in an economy that's as squishy as this is, with the uncertainty that we've got, it's probably better that we're not buying RVs, at least not in the numbers that we have been. So, with respect to demand drivers, you've got kind of two sets. You've got the operational and then the economic, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on economics. They're largely consumer-centric, because if you think about who the typical medium-duty vehicle buyer is, they're usually small business owners, right? So they think like you and I do. It's not about ROI, it's about how much month is left at the end of the money. You know, can I afford the payment? Are the springs poking me in the rear end, you know, when I get in? Or when I go to turn the key, does it work, you know? The truck is not the business here. The truck supports the business, right? It's just a tool, and it's one that oftentimes is ignored or overlooked. As I think we saw with our friends in the lease rental business, who had a very good year this year. When people needed capacity in a hurry, they didn't bother buying their own truck. They went out and rented or leased, and the demand manifested itself and was satisfied that way. Yeah, you got all those great economic things that are going on, and but look where demand really comes from, right? Trucks get old, they wear out, they have to be replaced, and so that's the beauty of the stock replacement model that we have. That, you know, if I can get that right, I automatically get a C on my forecast. If I can get the nuances right, you know, that's just gravy on the roast beef there. So. And I think that's probably good. I stuck some information on correlations out there. Some of the biggest drivers in the light and medium duty space are housing related, as well as what happens in the automotive market. And it was interesting to hear Mark this morning talk about, yeah, those markets are down, but you know, they're down this much, they're not down this much. And so we've got a good floor, I think, for demand in the medium duty space and what's happening in 2020 and 2021.